Hey, Vistista here, and welcome back. It's been a long while since I recorded. I am here with WDC Season 2. So last season, I had a pretty good season. I think I was just short of making first overall seed. And I had a tough loss in the finals to Tyler. And I ended up drafting a team with the restriction that every Pokemon on my team was new to Scarlet and Violet. This season, I want to do something a little bit similar, in which every single one of my Pokemons are more or less associated with the expansion. However, the expansion doesn't have enough unique new Pokemon, and so I also included the Legends Arceus Pokemon and new Pokemon from the expansions that were not previously available in Scarlet and Violet, and also not available in Sword and Shield. So that's kind of the theme that I'm going for. So lots of new Pokemon that I haven't really used before, and a reasonable number of restrictions, but a fair number of picks. And so this also kind of could be described as Pokemon new to Regulation E or Regulation E or above in VGC that were not in Sword and Shield is another way you could describe this restriction. But anyways, with that, let's get into kind of my draft. So starting off, I wanted to get a highest tier Pokemon, and I was kind of not super late, but I was like midway through the draft, and a lot of the options ended up being taken. So these are the main options that there were for me to take. I think these are pretty much explicitly all the options I could in the highest tier. And by the time it got to me, the only available options were the Ursalunas and the Raging Bolt. And so I decided I wanted to go with Raging Bolt. Um, the main reason behind it is because this is the more new out of the options. Ursaluna is a little bit older, and so I have not played with Raging Bolt at all. And so I decided I wanted to test it out specifically because I thought it'd be interesting since I've already kind of know how Ursaluna plays, since I've seen it a little bit more in competitive and whatnot. Um, but Raging Bolt, the big plus side, it's a really bulky mon. It has really good special attack. It has some setup moves, and it has very strong priority coverage with that. And so, with a big bulky mon that has a ground weakness that has good setup moves, I thought a great pairing with it was Sinistra. Sinistra, the idea behind it is one, you can switch it in and to a ground move, it takes it. You can Rage Powder away ground moves into it so that you can't hit um, Raging Bolt with super effective moves. It also switching in. You can use Hospitality to heal if you have it in the back, which is a good way to, since it's fairly bulky. That's kind of the idea. Sinistra also, has pretty good special attack, can also set up itself, can also do Trick Room, in which Raging Bolt's not the fastest, so that also helps with that. So that's kind of the idea with, Sinistra, which, likes pivoting to get Hospitality healing. It likes bulky mons. It also likes mons that have Intimidate. And so with that, I decided to go with Arcanine Hisui. Like I said, base Arcanine is not included in this list, but Arcanine Hisui because it's there. And like I said, the idea with this, Intimidate, one, helps with the bulk of Raging Bolt, makes it harder to kill. It has good physical attack, which is important in the fact that I have two special attackers at the moment. And then it also is another mon that Rage Powdering away ground moves can be really helpful. It's the Ice Resist, which both these two are weak to ice. And that's kind of the idea with this. And so, this is kind of the idea, working our way here. And what after this, I actually ended up getting a pretty sad one, which is I got lost in Empoleon. So the reason why Empoleon was a sad loss is that there were actually not many steel Pokemon within this restriction. There were actually a total of 4 steel Pokemon I could actually get that were actually reasonable selections. Like there's some uh, you know, not fully evolved baby Pokemon that are really bad that are steel, but the only options that are actually valuable ones, there are 4 of, and Empoleon is by far the best. And so I lost Empoleon after I got my 3rd pick, and so this definitely was going to massively hurt me because Empoleon was going to be my steel mon. And so with that, I had to move on, adjust, and instead of picking my Stillmon, which was going to be my next pick, I ended up picking Volbeat. So this one was really tough because it was between Volbeat and Illumise, which are both very similar to each other. These both were not in Sword and Shield and are new to the expansion. They have Tailwind with Prankster Tailwind. They have Prankster Encore, and a couple other relevant moves like Thunder Wave, Light Screen. And they're really similar overall. Volbeat is has a better physical attack. Illumise has a better special attack, and their only difference in sport moves is Volbeat has Tell Glow and Taunt, and Illumise has Fake Tears and Charm. And so I decided I don't really need Charm as much because I have Intimidate already. And so the big difference was between Fake Tears and Taunt, and I decided Taunt was going to be somewhat relevant. Also, because pivoting might be somewhat relevant, the higher attack stat on like a U-turn with Volbeat could be very relevant, as well, just getting a little bit extra damage. And so that's the reason why I went with Volbeat specifically. However, the big idea is, as you can tell, my first three mons, if you know them somewhat well, are pretty slow. Like Arcanine's not slow, but like none of these are particularly fast. So the Prankster Tailwind getting some speed control seems quite impactful, especially with something that does as high damage output as some of these mons, because Arcanine and Raging Bolt are really high damage outputs, especially if you give it like booster energy for you get a booster special attack on the Raging Bolt, or head smash with Arcanine. After this, it was a little bit tricky of which mon I wanted next. I was mainly torn between two, which is my Finish My Water Fire Grass Core and just getting a fairly good valued Pokemon. And I decided to get more valued Pokemon that I was interested in running, which was Gliscor. So the reason why I like Gliscor is, one, it gives me a ground immunity that isn't rock weak, which I think is very good because, as you can tell, I have no rock resist currently, and having a flying mon that is weak to rock could make it really hard for me. In addition, the ground immunity is nice, given the fact that my two main offensive threats currently are weak to ground. And overall, Gliscor is I think a powerful mon that is also fairly bulky, which goes well with the Sinistcha. Like I said, kind of the idea of what I'm doing with art, which is like support mons or bulky mons are kind of the main focus. However, at this point, I have a bunch of mons. None of them are particularly fast. Volbeat does help because it has Tailwind. And so I decided I wanted a mon that is a little bit more offensive. Good, goes to the point. Fast, offensive leaning, and I got Greninja. So this does a couple things. One, it gives me a Dark type, which I definitely wanted, especially because there's not a huge number of Dark mons. This gives me my Water mon because Empoleon was also going to be my Water on top of my Steel mon. And there weren't too many other water types that were super exciting that were legal. The only other options really were Samurai Husui and base Samurott and for Alligator, and none of those were like incredibly exciting. And so Greninja actually gives me a mon that's over 100 base speed, and also is pretty exciting with a special or physical attacker that also has good priority on top of Protean, which can give you some surprise massive damage. After this, I wanted to get my Fairy type because I currently didn't have a Fairy type, and there are a very small number of Fairy types within my restriction. The only Fairy types are Enamorous, the two Enamorous forms, and then Granbull. So I got Granbull because, one, I wanted a Fairy type. Two, I thought it was one of the best value mons. It is in the lowest tier that I drafted, and with that, I think Granbull is really good. It has really good attack stat. It's not the fast. It's pretty slow. So like a reasonable Trick Room speed. In all honesty, it has Intimidate, which gives me a second Intimidator. Which like I said, pivoting seems like it's going to be a pretty good thing this season, especially with the Sinistcha, hopefully. And it's just overall like just having a Fairy mon I think is always powerful, especially with the fact that I have 0 Dragon Resist at this moment. And so giving me a dragon immunity is really good. From here, I decided I wanted to get my my fighting type. Um, I I always think that having a fighting type is really important. One of the awkward things with the fighting types within the restriction that I had, and one of the reasons why I wanted Gliscor was that all the fighting types have a ground weakness that I could get, because it is Sneasler, Hisuian Sneasel, Embor, and Fernape, and Okie Dokie. So I got Okie Dokie because, like I've said a couple times, I wanted a bulky mon. I like it in that aspect. It, getting bulk up, being immune to intimidate, is really powerful. It has just overall, it's just a great stat. Like I 100% would prefer this thing to have been just a normal type, or no, just a fighting type, not a fighting poison type. But the fighting poison type, it does give you some benefits. You're not weak to fairy, which is good, and it gives you, like stab damage that is fairly good against some of its weaknesses. Um, but like I said, I wanted the fighting type. Gives me a rock resist. It gives just generically a good offensive typing, and getting this one over something like Sneasler makes sense because it works a lot better with um, kind of the general core, which is annoying people with like disruption with the intimidates, and setting up and healing my Pokemon with hospitality from the Sinistra. So from there, I at this point I was pretty much just happy with my team. There was not much, um, at this point. If I didn't get, I would be sad with, and so I kind of just felt like my team was more or less complete here, and the rest was just kind of getting some finishing touches. So with that, I decided to get Ambipom. So with this is my second one with over 100 base speed. Next, Greninja is the other. This also gives me Fake Out, in which I do not have Fake Out at this point, and so getting a nice disruptive mon with Fake Out. This also helps a little bit with having a Ghost immunity as well, which is always nice. But the main idea was I wanted to Fake Out a little bit more speed. It also gets like Faint and a couple other supportive moves, but the main idea was just a solid Fake Out mon that can do some damage. It gets triple axle and skill link as well, so like it's pretty powerful with that. And so with at this point, the one big thing I feel like I was missing is the Steelmon. But as I mentioned, there are not many good Steelmons after the Empoleon, which is why I was a little bit sad to lose it. However, the main options were Bastiodon and Probopass, and they are super similar. They're both the same exact typing in Rock Steel. They're both really slow. They both have really good defense stats. They don't have the big difference between them is Bastiodon has Foul Play. Probopass is slightly better special attack. Bastiodon's better defensive. Probopass is a little bit better specially defensive, and so like overall they're really comparable. I was very much debating which one was better, and it ended up that Tyler ended up getting Probopass, and so because of that, I got Bastiodon. Bastiodon is not the greatest. It gets Wide Guard, Iron Defense, Body Press, so some good things. It gets Foul Play. So it definitely has some benefits to it, but overall, like definitely a lot weaker of a Steel type than I wanted, in which Empoleon would have been great. But as it is a very solid resistances for me, helping me get a rock resist, helping me with flying weakness, things like that. And then finally, I wanted to finish off with another mon that gets a Trick Room and also just like a generic Psychic type. And with that, I decided to go with Weirdeer since it was kind of the best available. The only other option really was Chimecho, and Chimecho is significantly worse than this. I think it's less bulky, has overall it does not have as many viable abilities because Weirdeer has 3 really good abilities in Frisk, Sap Sipper, and Intimidate. And Weirdeer also just has a lot better offensive stats. And so with that ends up being my team. So here's the team overall. You can kind of see it. I have some really slow Pokemon like Bastion and Gramble. I have some really fast Pokemon in Greninja and Ambipom. My type chirp's okay. I have a little bit of a ground weakness, but there's not much I could do about that. Like I mentioned, I really wanted a fighting type, and all of them are ground weak. I wanted a steel mon because otherwise I'd have a little bit of a ice and flying weakness and rock weakness. So it's like it kind of gets in the position that the big one is like it ended up being that Okidoki's having to be ground weakness is I think the big issue with it. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the team, and hopefully, I'll in a couple of days I'll have my first match, and you can see. Hopefully, you enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in week 1, which is coming up soon.